Good evening. Welcome to the My Spiritual Awakening speaker series, hosted here at the Chapel of the Cross and sponsored by the Lilly Endowment, Inc., which provides funding for a variety of projects that we do to encourage and engage undergraduate students in the opportunity to reflect on their vocation and their spiritual life. We are so excited to finally be having some in-person community at this gathering, as well as to be connecting with our virtual audience. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm very excited to introduce to you Kaze Kevin Thomas, who is an alumnus of UNC and currently serves as the Arts and Culture Director for the Downtown Chapel Hill Partnership. Kaze is an artist, has a huge resume of all kinds of wonderful arts and cultural things, including being a DJ, a producer, a musician, an actor, and we are so excited to get to hear more of your story. Evan Mead is one of our students here and is a student chaplain and a Lilly leader who again helps to provide this variety of opportunities for students to reflect together, and Evan is going to be our moderator tonight. So I invite you to enjoy your conversation with one another, and we give thanks for all of the support that the Chapel of the Cross and the Lilly Endowment, Inc. provides for this opportunity for us to listen in.
Thank you so much, Mary Kat, and thank you again, Kaze, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
You and I got the chance to talk a little bit over the last couple days, and you've had a very interesting life. You yourself were a UNC Chapel Hill student a couple years back, and you now have moved back to Chapel Hill, and you live here with your wife and family. And obviously, as Mary Kat was saying, you have a very long and really interesting resume as well. If you want to go ahead and start with something or another, how about we start talking about your time here at UNC Chapel Hill? You came in with a lot of dreams about what you wanted to do with your life, and you're a very talented person, but you have a lot of cultural and creative ambitions. So when you were at UNC Chapel Hill, kind of in what way did you see your life going, and how did you kind of express those ambitions at the time?
Yeah, can y'all hear me? Can you hear me out there? Okay, perfect. Where do I start, man? I think I just want to start out by saying, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank y'all for having me here, and y'all taking the time to come out here, and shouts out to Paige Zen in the back there, that for sure a good friend of mine. Where I was born in Dale City, Virginia, Fort Belvoir, Northern Virginia, and my mother passed when I was 3 from lupus, and so that I just want to mention that because it's like an immediate kind of impact on my life. I always have felt like I needed to make good for my mother, like that I needed to do something. Or whatever that is, whatever I was going to pursue in life, that I needed to do something that would make her proud of me. If she was looking down on me, or just observing my growth, that I would do something that would make her proud. And I just always kind of trying to carry that energy underneath the current of whatever it was I was doing, my schoolwork, participating in sports, just being a community citizen, or just a person that people would know, where if you interacted with me, you would be like, he's got really good energy, or there's something about this person that's positive, And so, with that being said, when my mother passed, my father remarried like a year later, and to my stepmother, but I call her my mother because when she married my father, I was 3 years old, and to me that, in hindsight, me being my age now, looking back, that's like one of the most ultimate sacrifices I think that that she did. She married a man knowing that she was going to have to raise somebody else's 3-year-old, and so I call her my mother as well, and just have ultimate gratitude for her. And she's still here. She's 86. My father passed about 5 years ago, but my mother is still here, and I'm glad to say I'm her power of attorney, and I kind of take care of her situation. So I say all that to say, when my father retired, I was about 13. We moved to a one-stop light town in eastern North Carolina called Richlands, North Carolina. It's Piggly Wiggly and a stoplight, basically, if you know any towns like that. And in that environment, is kind of when I started having my bigger dreams or ambitions that seemed like I had to get outside of my small town in order to make them happen. And Chapel Hill, being 2 hours away for whatever reason, seemed like utopia. Like if I can just get there, there's the space and opportunity to pursue whatever it is I'm gonna do. And at that point, I really didn't know. But what I did know were the things that had impacted me from the very beginning. And I think that this ties back into losing, you know, my mother. Is like trying to figure out who I was or what my identity and what my purpose was. And music, entertainment, you know, those things just always made my eyes like light up, you know, and for the reason that I just always, when I didn't have an identity or a courage or a knowledge of self, I got it from the things that I would see or the artists that I would listen to that would make me, you know, KRS-One, you know, Talib, people like that would make me dig into Black history, Public Enemy, things like that were teaching me about Dr. King and Malcolm X and the parts of so much of Black American history that's not taught in schools. You know, I was getting that from my favorite artists and the stories that I was seeing on screen, and I just felt really empowered by it. And so that really spawned me to say, you know what, I want to be the person for the next generation of people to see that may be inspired by something, or that I can make a difference with some of the music or entertainment, or that would put me in a position to where I could have influence and talk to
And when you came to Chapel Hill as well, you kind of, I mean, you pretty quickly kind of like started trying to do some of those things that you talked about. I mean, you founded an organization, Hip Hop Nation here in Chapel Hill, which was really, you know, helpful and empowering for, you know, the Black music scene in this town of what, you know, hasn't always been considered the most culturally diverse town in North Carolina by far.
Yeah.
So.
I couldn't get a show in this town when I first came out here. I'm gonna be honest, man. Like, it was having to explain to a lot of people what hip hop was.
Yeah.
You know, and we're talking about in like '95. You know, and you know, people knew it. You know, I don't mean it that way, but in the sense of like, what are you doing here? Where you're rapping? Like, what's going on? Like, is this like straight out of Compton? Like, what are you doing? Like, it's just this wholly misunderstanding when people don't have an understanding of kind of like, how does that work for you, right?
Yeah.
And my parents felt the same way. A lot of my family felt the same way. Like, you're rapping, you're doing, like, what are you doing? Because in their mind and in their vision, it was just what you see on TV, or, you know, it's all gangster, or it's cussing and negativity and things like that. And so I wanted to show, you know, when I got here, I was like, yo, let's make an organization for all of the kids that are like me, that, you know, there's a creativity, that there's an art present in hip hop culture, that there's an art present in Black music and Black culture. And I wanted to create an organization that would kind of feed all the people that came to Carolina looking for a way to express themselves creatively outside of the traditional paths, you know. Sure. There wasn't a place in the music department to learn how to make beats, you know, or DJ. There is now, right? But at that time, there wasn't. There wasn't a studio on campus. There was no way to pursue these things. And so when I came to orientation, they said, you can make any group you want, any organization you want here. That's your freedom. And so I was like, you know, we're going to make an organization for the kids like me that want to learn how to do these things. And you know, and that was kind of a big starting point, like a support group, I guess you would say, for all the other kids that were thinking like that. And so, yeah, I'm proud that we were able to create something that gave so many people like an opportunity to learn how to do these things and express themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And kind of around the same time, I know, like you had, at this time of, you know, obviously change in your life, and then at this time that you kind of start like really taking those steps to pursuing what had been your childhood dreams, kind of in the same way, the way that your faith life developed around that got, you know, obviously complicated as it does for a lot of college students. Yeah.
Absolutely, because of like that thing, right? Because when you're pursuing something and you're trying to create you know, at the same time you're young, you're trying to figure out who you are. You know, I'm sure that, you know, many people of my age will tell you they're not the same person they were when they were 19, 20, 21 years old. You know, they've probably changed maybe twice, you know, in that time frame. And at that time, I thought that when I got up here that being a good guy wasn't cool, right? That going to church wasn't cool. That even though I was going to church every day back home, right? Or that this was going to be the new version of me that rapped, and that wasn't this, and I'm gonna hang out over here, and I'm gonna do these things, and you know, and what I perceived, right? Like what I thought being this, what being a rapper meant, or being a producer, or being in the industry, and you start going down this path where it's like, who are you trying to impress? Like, I'm trying to be cool in the sense that was kind of detached from a lot of like the way I was raised, you know, and a lot of the things that, like I said, when I was in high school, I was in church every Sunday in the back. I took the collection up. I went to Sunday school. Like, you were going to do that in my house, or you couldn't live there, you know. And when you get here, it's like you want to, you know, when I got here, I wanted to loosen my collar up, right? And I thought that I could do things, you know, I was talking to you about this yesterday, that I could do things without talking to God about it, right? That I'm on my path now, you know, that, yeah, I can talk to God about it, but that's going to hold me to a standard that I just want to have fun right now and do my thing. And I thought that was, you know, all the other people around me are succeeding, and I don't see them in tune with that, and I thought that was okay. And the more and more that time went on, when I started making decisions under my own understanding, I continually made the wrong ones, or made ones that would kind of put me in a deficit where things didn't work out, you know. And a lot of it was about being impatient, you know, at an age where I felt like things should have been happening, and so like when you're not willing to, you know, and this is kind of a reflection on it, I was wanting it then. I felt like I should be, you know, things should be happening at 20 and 21 years old, and then so that stress of being impatient, you start making decisions that probably ain't the, you know, I was making decisions that weren't the best for me, right? Like, because I couldn't wait on the thing to happen for me. I'm gonna go do it, so I'm borrowing money from a person I shouldn't borrow money from. Now I owe money to a person I shouldn't owe money to, right? I'm in different spaces where it's like, man, like, should I be here? You know, but that was a continual thing. It was just leaning on my own understanding, as opposed to in the past, and then even now, where I do my very best to try to pray on things before I make any decision, before I make any move, any opportunity. Even, you know, and as I've gotten older, I've learned to ask God for things no matter what it is, and talk to him just like the same way that I'm talking to you, right? I thought that if I didn't talk to him and then I didn't pray, then he didn't see me, and I don't got to be accountable. Like, you know, I didn't go to church, so, and that's not how it works, right? Like, that's totally not how it works. But young version of you young version of myself, trying to reconcile who I was and what I was pursuing, it was all like my own like perception of what I felt like I could do without God, or without having to be accountable for my actions and things like that. And it just dug myself deeper and deeper away from the things that I wanted, and the things that I did get didn't last. And I found myself, you know, my senior year academically ineligible. All of my friends were graduating, going off to their jobs in different cities. And I was looked at kind of like, oh, he's back in Chapel Hill trying to rap. You know, that's kind of where it left me in that situation. The girl that I thought I was gonna marry at that time moved to Atlanta and didn't want to have anything to do with me. Like, I was in a very, very, like, personally, like, a low space, because I was like, I'm never gonna graduate. It was a lot of dead ends that just personal decisions had led me to, and a lot of that was just not being patient, you know, and not having conversations with God about what decisions and what steps that I should take in trying to pursue this.
And a lot of that, I think, kind of harkens back to like that part of like growing up that we talked about a little bit, of kind of that separation between what at the time you really thought, and I think what a lot of people think of is like the different ways of yourself, of the different at a different time and in a different place, kind of trying to make something different of yourself, or trying to or more than anything, seeing the world through different eyes.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we talked about a little bit how that, I mean, that kept changing. Obviously, that didn't stop, and sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. Because after college, you kind of really tried to talk a little bit about kind of that lane that you were talking about with patience, about with the success of your peers and other people that you had seen growing up around you.
Comparing.
That comparison and that almost sense of urgency or renewed urgency of trying to make something in, I mean, what felt like limited time at the time,
To that point, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, y'all, and this is something that people might not even know. I was throwing an open mic night, this is in early 2000s at Local 506, and there was a young kid that came in there and started coming to open mic. Y'all might know him, J. Cole. He was going by therapist back then. And one of my other best friends was Patrick Douth at Ninth Wonder, right? And so this is 2002. Cole's 16, 17. I'm sneaking him into the club. Ninth hasn't worked with anyone yet. I bought the first beat from Ninth Wonder for $100. And so when you see the person of the writer, you start working with Jay-Z and Beyonce. When you see the 15-year-old kid that you were helping get started sign to Jay-Z and go off, and then you're still sitting in Chapel Hill, it was a very disheartening, disappointing. I was depressed about it because not only did I see their success, they did not reach back to say, hey Kev, or Kaze, you want to work with us. Neither one of them did in that way, and they didn't owe that to me, but I just thought that would happen, and it didn't. And so it just kind of left me in this mode of comparison with their paths and my own. And I just felt the plane took off without me. Yeah. That I had missed my opportunities, for whatever reason, that I wasn't worthy to get the same blessings that they were getting. I didn't know. I was super confused. Super, I guess, lost in the wilderness, I guess, type of time where I was asking God a lot of questions that, I was upset about. Just to be honest and so fully transparent, that I was super upset about the way things were turning out. And I think at the same time, that was a time that I was humbled. I was forced to look at be accountable for my actions, or, my lack of understanding of, being patient and perspective. And it's funny because when I got that low, what did I start doing? Talking to God again every day, right? And that's why I'm sitting here now, thinking back on that, understanding that maybe that's how it had to go. And more and more, just understanding that okay, that's something that I could never be disconnected from again, And so all of that happening just made me kind of just go back in and refocus on what was important. On my family. I've been married 17 years. I got a 10-year-old son. I started my own record label. I just started refocusing on the things that mattered. And that mode of comparison, if that's a message to anyone, when you start comparing your timeline to other people's timelines, you're going to end up depressed and upset. Because what I understand now is at 44, the things that are happening for me now, what God had for me is different than you, than this person, and it could happen for some at 15, some at 21, some at 44. But when you're comparing my journey to someone else's journey, then you're going to end up hurt and disappointed. And so that's another part, I think, the patience and perspective, because I think a lot of times the things that didn't happen for me, I thought meant that it wasn't meant to be, right? And when you're in conversation with God, I feel that a lot of times when something doesn't happen for you, it doesn't mean nah, you're not good enough, you're not qualified. This isn't the situation for you, right? I will always, anything that didn't work out for me, I would always look back, and the situation, if it had worked out, I would have ended up in catastrophe. It would have been a dead end. Or, man, that guy got the spot instead of me, and now they're out of business. It was always something that, I felt in hindsight, it would come to pass why it didn't work out. absolutely. And so now sitting here, I just try my best to keep that type of focus of perspective and patience and communication with God, asking him, what's the way, what's the direction to go in, right? That I would move out to LA, you know, in pursuit, because I was so frustrated with what wasn't happening here, right? And I say all of that at the same time that it's kind of even selfish to say it. I'm saying nothing was happening, and I'm opening for Nas, and I'm opening for, just crazy things are happening.
Yeah, sure.
Kendrick, a lot of things are happening, but I'm not on Kanye and Jay-Z levels, so it's not working. You know, that it's kind of like being super selfish about it. But moving out to LA was like, nah, this is going to be the shot. I'm all in.
Yeah.
And when I got out there, after a certain period of time, just to be honest, my wife and my son needed me back here. You know, it was a situation where my family was kind of, my wife didn't give me an ultimatum, but just said that, you know, it's kind of that moment where you're either going to stay out here or you're going to come home.
Yeah.
And, you know, to be, you know, super honest, I prayed and during that time a lot, like, because I felt like going home to be with my family was the right thing and the thing that God wanted me to do. But I felt like I was giving up on my dream if I left LA. I felt like I was quitting or giving up on the thing that would happen. And I hated that it was that choice, like pick your family or your dream. That's what I felt. Yeah. And so I prayed at that time, like, God, I'm gonna go home and do what I feel like you want me to do, the right thing. But can you please show me the way or opportunity of a way for me to still do all of the things that I came out here to pursue. Yeah. Right. And that was a very hard feeling when I came back here, feeling like that I had kind of given up on everything, but I did it because I knew that I was doing the right thing, right? And so God's way being perfect and totally mysterious, I come back here and I end up working at a hair salon. And you know, I was just laughing with Paige about this because it's like, God, I want to come home and work in the music industry, and he's like, go work at a hair salon, right? And that makes like zero sense, right? But it made perfect sense once, you know, now even sitting here looking back on it, because sitting at that, you know, the front desk and doing customer service, and I met people like Paige, I met, you know, people like Susan Aaronhouse, I met Carol Folt, I met, you know, there's 100 people I could name, right? And to the point where I met the people that would end up, you know, I'm in conversation with people as they pass through about what I really do, and I mentioned that I would love to have a studio. It's always been my dream since I went to Carolina to have a studio downtown, and that I would meet the people that would find me a location, you know, that in mentioning it, they're like, what do you really want to do? I was like, well, I want to open a studio. That they would find me a location, that I would get it, that Al and Wendy Mann would invest in me, and that from sitting at a beauty salon, I would end up with my own studio on Franklin Street. Yeah. Right? And that just kind of blew my mind, because it was like, okay, God, like, really trust you. Really, really trust your way, even when it does not make sense. Like, it's that perspective of looking back. That beauty salon was exactly where I needed to be, right? And when I got that job and sat in there, I said, I'll only be here 3 or 4 months. And shout out Luann Duran, Alejandra Scott, you know, they just made that home for me, you know? And that was a big step into me being, like, reintroduced as, like, a Chapel Hill person, you know? Because I'd been gone and moved around, and people, you know, not everybody kind of knew me from being here, you know? And so that was a perfect reintroduction to the community, and gave me the opportunity to start being out here and touching things and wanting to help the next kids that were out here looking for that lighthouse or that opportunity to pursue the things that they wanted to pursue like I wanted to pursue them, right? I had kids come knock on my door and be like, it just looks like this is the studio. The logo, I know something's cool going on in here, is just the studio. And I love that, you know, that the next generation of kids that come to Carolina were coming to me to be mentored about how to pursue their dreams as a, you know, a recording artist or a visual artist and things like that. And Yeah, man, I'm just rambling.
Yeah,
but,
no, and I mean, and I think that like, of the underlying things that we've talked about and that you're talking about now is that sense of patience, and when that patience kind of came back to you around this time, when you kind of became content with the way that things were moving, when you kind of started putting your trust in knowing that things were going to happen the way that they needed to happen. Things, I mean, honestly did happen. And when we talked about kind of how the pandemic affected you, that difference in perspective from you at 40 compared to you at 20, and how all of a sudden when, you know, this new downturn happened, that kind of sense of knowing that things, that sense of tragedy, but that completely different mindset of it.
Sure. So like, if you know, rewind back to like, you know, March of, it was like 2020, beginning of 2020, and I had put every dime that I had and all my energy into this location here. It was right next to Heavenly Buffalo on the second floor, and I had been blessed enough to get, you know, another spot in Durham, and I had part ownership. Things were happening. You know, I was just super excited about it, and at the same time, just to take a step back, because I didn't mention this, you know, I was signed to Universal for about, you know, 2 years, and once again, what I saw my peers doing, actually me and J. Cole got signed around the same time. And so when I'm seeing the success of my peers and things that didn't happen for me, I ended up leaving the label and not having these things happen for me, which kind of made me feel like I fell off the Empire State Building, right? That I had worked so hard. I got signed to Universal Motown. Same guy signed me that signed Wu-Tang, Akon. I'm thinking things are gonna happen to me. The day I got signed, we went to dinner, Jay-Z was there. Like, it was, you know, I'm like, my dreams are coming true. For all that to happen, and then 3 years later, I was right back here. Love Chapel Hill, y'all. But that felt like I fell off a mountaintop. You know what I'm saying? And so what did make me feel good was to have the studio and to be in the music venue and things like that, because I'm like, okay, I'm still present in the things I love to do. Pandemic, and so that was my way of kind of like taking some mortar and painting over that dream.
Sure, yeah.
I don't need to rap anymore. I got a studio, I got a music venue. I don't need to produce. I'm good on that. Pandemic comes along, March, April, May, June, July. My landlord's like, Kev, I can't, you know, can't do half the rent anymore. And so I ended up losing everything I had invested in over that last 3-4 years, you know. And in that moment, I went back home, and like you said, that patience and perspective, I was talking to God about it. It felt like the end of the world, but this time felt like a little different. You know, I was like, have your way, Lord. I just remember saying that many times, like, hey, God, have your way, however it's supposed to go. Like, because I just really felt like he knocked everything out my hands, you know, and I didn't know, kind of didn't understand why, but at the same time, I was just kind of going to be content with what was going to happen. It was probably like 2 weeks later, I got a call from Matt Gladdick. Hey, where'd you go? You know, who was the director, executive director, Downtown Partnership? Where'd you go? Aaron Nelson, that runs the Chambers. Like, what happened? Where'd you go? And that felt really good that, you know, people in the community were concerned with like where I went and what happened. And because I'd put so much energy out here that was positive in the arts and culture and the music, that had resonated. I was super happy about that. And so Matt was like, wait, you know, could you come do the things you were doing at VibeHouse? Could you come do that for downtown and for Chapel Hill? Yeah, sure. Absolutely, right? And then we have a conversation, and then next thing you know, I'm director of arts and culture for downtown Chapel Hill, right? And, you know, from sitting at the front desk at a salon, from losing my record deal and things like that, and I'm like, this was the way that it was probably meant to happen, that I had to trust. Once again, I just had to trust that the things that were happening, and because what also happened in that period, because now I have a job that instead of just working on my studio, I can do anything downtown, right? So he expanded my influence. Like, I thought losing everything was the end of the world, and instead he took it and expanded my influence, right? and put me in the house long enough to where I was like, what am I doing? Why did I give up on my dream? Why am I so disconnected from my creativity? Like all of that. And in the middle of that pandemic, I made what I felt like is some of the best music that I've ever made in my life.
Yeah.
And has totally, I've been, you know, if y'all have seen the music going on downtown every Saturday, that's been a big part of what I've been, you know, responsible for. I just did the University Place. I got a show in LA next week. The love that I'm getting out of Houston and Atlanta and the places that outside of here, it's crazy, man. And the pandemic for me was the best and the worst thing that ever happened. You know, for obvious reasons, the loss of life and the sickness is not anything to celebrate, but it put me in a moment where I had to be still and once again reevaluate, have conversations with God and have perspective. And now I feel like he took me from where I was and put me right, like back where I was supposed to be at. Like I can't express that enough, like how I feel like he literally erased everything I did wrong and fast forward me to like where I should be, like in my timeline. I totally feel that way. That's like so crazy to even say right now, because I couldn't have mapped it out. You know, how these things happen is blessings, it's supernatural, it's miracles, like a lot of these things. The guy that shoots my videos ends up working on a drama and asks me, do I want to audition, and now I get the lead role? Like, what? Like, these are the things that are starting to happen in my life, because I'm talking, you know, to God about him every day, and then don't get me wrong, I'm farthest thing from perfect, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I do wake up and I try every day. And I am in conversation with God every day about what decisions I should make, how I should move, and just everything moving forward, because I have no other explanation for like all these things turning around the way they did. And just the blessing of losing my mother and then getting another person that would end up being a major influence in my life, that I would come to Carolina and be on academic probation and then end up doing these things, and I'd work at a salon, meet it's just not a coincidence, man. You know, I don't feel like that any of this is a coincidence, and I just want to share that story with people, man, and let them know, because when you're younger, it's just easy to get disconnected, man. You know, God ain't made to look cool as some of the other stuff that's going on out here. You know, you know, you're not as cool, or you know, you're not as tough, or you're not as any of these things. And it's just actually the opposite. You know, you're putting your foundation on something that'll never let you down. That, you know, conversations I have with him when I can't talk to anyone else about things, and he's never not responded, even if the answer has been no or wait. You know, even in those times when I was in college and I look back and say I was out here just doing whatever I wanted to do, I was like, oh, you were there too, even then, you know. And yeah, that part of it where it's like now I'm right where I feel like I couldn't even have put myself if I had done everything right.
Yeah. And I think that part of that journey that you've been talking about is that idea that now, with where you're at right now, doing your work in Chapel Hill, you're kind of getting right back to that original dream that you had of wanting to create an environment, to create a public where you can help the next generation, that you can help those young people out. You've gotten to do that a couple times over the last couple of years, but right now you're in this place with this influence that you're really able to help expand Chapel Hill's culture, to kind of bring in this next generation, and you really are starting to think about or not starting to think about, you've been thinking about it for a long time, but really creating these spaces to help other people in a way that, I mean, I think a lot of us are called to do through God in one way or another.
Yeah, thank you, man. You know, one of the first things that I was able to do was this program called Save the Music, you know, and a lot of the things that I try to do for other artists or other people are things that I know I personally need, and I know that I'm not the only one, right? And so I knew as an artist, I'd been in the house for 6-8 months, no shows, no interaction. I'm a people person, so just not being able to vibe, like hurt, like physically, you know, mentally. And so much of what I like to do is going to music shows, Cat's Cradle, you know, whatever, just being around my people, you know? And I say that, I just mean all creatives, no matter what color, race you are, just like my people. And so I was like, you know what, I'm not the only one. So I asked Matt, I said, Matt, can we just start putting, I said, this town has been getting away with having a music reputation for years and not investing in its talent and its creatives. Can we start just letting artists perform downtown in these different spaces because they've been cooped up in the house, and this is gonna, you know, help them, you know. We could only offer them a little bit of money, but it was better than nothing, and the response was crazy. We had like 60 artists reach out, you know, we put the call out, we had like 60 artists reach out, and ever since last fall of 2020, we've been putting 4 or 5 artists out on Franklin Street every Saturday. But we missed a few Saturdays, but you know, even this fall, we're doing every home game day, and that's just been amazing. Just the feedback and the energy that artists have told me, like, yo, man, thank you for doing this or creating this space, right? Because that's the thing. Anytime that I run into something, I think, you know, God has blessed me with the ability, the strength to like persevere and get through that door. And I'm like, okay, now this door needs to stay open. You know, and that's just how I try to move. Like if I go through it, I'm like, okay, now this door needs to stay open. And so I was like, absolutely, if this town wants to have this music reputation, and that's the thing, when I came here in '95, it was absolutely Squirrel Nut Zippers were going platinum from here, Ben Folds, like all these amazing things were happening here. Like, and Cat's Cradle 506 was in Rolling Stone, Chapel Hill was on the same list as Athens, Seattle, and Austin, Texas, like for its music scene. And so that's the era that I came into Chapel Hill on. It wasn't that much space made for black music and black artists and that type of energy and hip hop. But I think that was part of what I was here for, you know. And I just wanted to keep expanding that. Like I said, I couldn't get a show here. Now there's rap shows at 506 and Cat's Cradle all the time. That wasn't a thing, you know, and I like to think that I helped, you know, ease that or usher that kind of, you know, perspective in where they're like, nah, these kids are talented and they deserve a chance, you know, because I would be in New York on stage saying, yeah, Chapel Hill in the house. Like, and they're like, what? You know, and I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in LA, and I'm like, Chapel Hill in the house. And I'm backing down kids from Jersey and Philly. Right? And so that I was putting that onus, that energy back here to where they're like, man, you know, wow, you know, like, it was like, wow. And so, yeah, man, I kind of lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. But, yeah, go ahead.
Super. Kaze, I just want to thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been really a pleasure having you. If anyone who is here would like to keep talking to Kaze, we'll be having a reception after the fact, and you are more than welcome to come up, introduce yourself, and join Kaze in what I'm sure will be an incredible discussion. And you have an amazing story, and I want to thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here, and Kaze, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it.